let's talk about the first case of AIDS. And I was going through some of my stuff, getting ready to send things to the archive. I've talked about Dr. Mike Gottlieb. If you remember, Gottlieb was the UCLA immunologist who reported the first 5 cases of AIDS anywhere. And it started with his work at UCLA, just seeing patients. And he and a resident saw one patient and found a couple more. Then they talked to other people around LA and put these 5 cases together and reported them to the Centers for Disease Control and later in the New England Journal. And that was it. That was the June 5th, 1981 report. A couple years after that, I was at a meeting and we were having dinner after the meeting, and another doc, a longtime infectious diseases doc from LA, said that, well, he had seen a case of AIDS in 1979. This doc was Dr. Wilbur Jordan, who was an infectious diseases physician in LA. And we were talking about the Gottlieb's cases and what had happened since then, because what had happened since Gottlieb's cases is there were another 50 cases that accumulated from New York City and LA that were reported by CDC within a month of that June report. So things were really starting to cook. And we were all surprised around the table thinking, what are you talking about? And he described this case and said that since Gottlieb's reports, they've gone back through the record and determined that this guy also had AIDS. The point is that epidemics and pandemics like this don't just explode one day, that they're always simmering someplace. And this case was probably one of several others. The case that our friend Wilbur Jordan knew about was one of several others that were popping up around not only LA, but New York and other big cities that weren't recognized as AIDS because we didn't know about it. So we just called it this obscure disease, this obscure pneumonia that is, we now know is associated with AIDS, but never really recognized it for what it was until Gottlieb put the first 5 cases together. If you really go back through the history of AIDS, in 1969 or so, there was a teenage boy in St. Louis who was hospitalized with an unknown illness. And somebody had the foresight with that kid's case, because he died, had the foresight to save the autopsy materials. And it was in the 1980s that people went back and looked at those materials from that young boy's autopsy and actually found pieces of DNA from HIV. So there are signals then that sometimes go either unnoticed or are overlooked, that when we go back and take a look, can put the whole picture together. As for me, when I read the Gottlieb cases, I had the foresight to file the report away and made a folder, because we had file folders in those days. There was no internet and there was no digital anything. So filed it away in a file folder and called it Infectious Diseases Other, thinking, well, it's kind of interesting and I may need it. in the future. I had no idea what I was doing that day, but so that's what I'm sending to the archive, is the folder with infectious diseases other. The other thing to just to mention here is that when you look at the internet for June 5th, 1981, for that CDC report, the CDC has now reformatted that report so that Gottlieb's cases are on the front page of the June 5th, 1981 report. And Gottlieb tells the story, is that there was something else on the cover, and that his cases being reported were actually on page 2.